This is the House of Hockey podcast on the Hockey Podcast Network. Hockey is more than a game, it's a lifestyle. It's you, the diehard supportive fans, your favorite players who are on the team you cheer for, and the organization who supports them.
The companies that make your gear, bags, and beer league sweaters. The hockey moms and hockey dads, and everything else that makes this House of Hockey your home. Come on in. I'm Breezy.
And I'm Rae Rae.
And this is our house. You've heard us talk about DraftKings, the leader in daily fantasy sports, and how payday can come every day by entering their contest with huge cash prizes up for grabs. This week is jam-packed with action ranging from basketball to golf, and DraftKings has plenty of ways for you to have a front row seat to all of the action. Making a lineup on DraftKings adds excitement to every night and is simple to do. All you got to do is add your lineup and feel the sweat like never before, and every moment means more with a DraftKings lineup on the line. DraftKings has paid over $7 billion to users across all sports, and DraftKings is always going to be the leader in daily fantasy sports. There's no better place to get in on all of the action. Now that you know how to play, download DraftKings app and sign up using the code THPN. That's THPN for the Hockey Podcast Network. New users will get a free entry with their first deposit. That's code THPN, THPN for the Hockey Podcast Network, to get a free entry with your first deposit. Only at DraftKings. Minimum $5 deposit required. Eligibility restrictions apply, and see DraftKings.com for details. What's up, guys? You are listening to the House of Hockey podcast on the Hockey Podcast Network. I am Breezy.
And I'm your other co-host, Rae Rae.
And this week we have Kevin Kurz in the house, who is the writer for the San Jose Sharks for The Athletic. So you can only imagine what this episode's about. We're talking about the San Jose Sharks.
Yes, and also the life of a journalist, a hockey journalist, and his career and how he got started and the relationships he builds with players, and he's got some good player stories and stuff like that. Let's just quick life update for everybody, since if you're watching on video or have been listening the last couple of weeks, I've been on a cross-country road trip with Ringo the dog. And if you're watching on video behind me, I also have Alex the dog, which is my aunt's dog. I'm in her room right now recording this because I haven't, set up my recording space yet. And I just got here yesterday from when we were filming this, and Ringo's getting used to all the new sounds and the snow and the dogs. So I'm in Maine, and we made it. And the road trip was crazy. So I'll talk about this a little bit if you want to hear about it. But me and Ringo, we spent 9 total days of driving over 3,000 miles from Los Angeles to just outside of Portland, Maine. We didn't take a direct route because I went to see my oldest, longest, dearest friend that I've known since I was 2, who lives in St. Louis. So I spent a couple days with her, and then no, Ringo, you stay here. You're not allowed to go run around. And then I spent a couple days in Nashville with my brother, which is where he lives, to break up the trip in the middle, which was awesome. And Ringo did great. I did fine. And so when we recorded the interview with our guest this week, I was in Nashville. So the background's different and all of that, and life's different again. But Breezy had also requested, because you all know Breezy's Barbecue Pit, she wanted me to go to Martin's Barbecue, which is a famous barbecue spot in Nashville. However, Breezy, it was closed.
No! That's okay. I guess that just means we need to go to Nashville together, and I just need to take you to Martin's Barbecue. Martin's Barbecue is my favorite barbecue place in the entire world.
Okay. Well, I just want you to know I tried. And then when we found out it was closed, I was like, well, now I want barbecue. So now we have to go get barbecue. So we went to Adley's, which I'd had before, and the brisket was good. I mean, I was happy, any soul food when you're traveling across country is good. My favorite thing I saw on the whole road trip was, because there's a lot of trucks, right? A lot of big semi trucks everywhere on every highway. And one of them had a plastic scrotum, plastic balls hanging off the back, swinging, as they do when they're attached to the bottom of a truck. And they were pink, and I was like, this just like made me chuckle and also warmed my heart. And I was just like, oh, I'm on the road, and like,
Yeah.
it's only complete. Like, do you remember when there used to be those like half naked stencil women on the truck flaps? Am I
Yeah, like
explaining
the ones
that?
that like were laying with like the foot up or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Like
Uh-huh.
that was like a quintessential road trip thing that I would see like when I was younger. We did a few road trips, but I didn't see any of those.
Yeah, I feel like they just are non-existent anymore.
It was sad. I was like
Yeah,
looking for that, and I didn't see it. But I got a ball sack, and so I was great.
that's that's great.
You know.
So did you stay in any fun, crazy place? Did you have so I'm like a big horror movie junkie, as
Mm.
everyone probably already knows by now. And I'm always like, wow, like if you go on a road trip, you're probably gonna end up staying in some like wonky places. Like I know like you don't necessarily want to stay at these places, but you have no choice.
Yeah.
Do you have like a Norman Bates story or anything like that?
No, I mean, I did do this on a budget, right? I stayed at
Yeah.
motels, everybody, because and the other challenge was traveling with Ringo.
Yeah.
So not all hotels are dog friendly, and like I'm not paying to stay at the Ritz, right? Like because there is no Ritz in Santa Rosa, New Mexico.
Hmm.
So, your options are limited. All in all, they were fine. And Ringo, as you've heard in the background of this episode, barks at strangers, stranger danger. Thank you, right on cue. At like anybody coming up the stairs, he's like, I forgot you were here. And like, so I think he kept like people at bay for sure.
Fantastic. I'm glad. I was quite worried
You
throughout
were?
this entire time. Yeah, because it's like
Why?
I've seen a lot of scary movies and I don't know, man. I didn't say anything to you because I was like, I don't want you to be freaking out, like
No, I
sleeping with
wasn't
one eye
freaked.
open. I mean, even I was a little freaked out. I mean, I went to Big Bear last weekend, right? And
Right.
we stayed in this huge house. This house on Zillow was like a $1.4 million house. Like it was huge.
What?
It was insane. Well, there was like a group of us, so we wanted to make sure that like we had like space. So we're like, I mean, even though we were always grouped together, like it doesn't kind of defeats the purpose, but like we wanted to make sure that we were in like a bigger area.
Right.
And
Just in
the room,
case.
yeah, just in case. And you could tell it was like a typical like cabin ish, but like maybe some older people own it and decorated it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, in the room I stayed in, so my friend got there the night before us because it was her birthday. So me and my other friend stayed in the room with her. But that room that we stayed in had like a little like balcony looking thing on the top or like a little cutout like on the wall. And there was stuffed animal bears everywhere and like
Oh.
a rocking chair horse on the ground, like right where I was sleeping. And I was like, yeah, I'm putting all of this in the closet, and if something goes off in the middle of the night, I'm out of here. I'm getting in the Jeep and I'm going. I'm going down the mountain.
That's wicked creepy. Like that's definitely some like next level creepy stuff happening for sure.
Yeah.
Like
And
I
it didn't
didn't have any of
no.
that. There was no
Yeah.
like creepy guy like walking down the hallway in the parking lot or anything. Like I
Thank
didn't
God. Jesus.
like definitely didn't have any of that.
That's great.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
no Norman Bates, no horror
No Norman
movie.
Bates. No open vacancy.
No. Wait.
Yes.
Shut the front door. Brent Seabrook retired.
He did.
Oh my God. I was driving because, of course, I was. And the little alert from ESPN came on, and I just glanced at it and I was like, what? Brent Seabrook retired? Like, I mean, we all knew that was happening. He had like five major body surgeries in the last year.
Yeah.
And I don't think he could really skate to the potential that he wanted to. I'm sure he can, but not
Yeah.
to, Stanley Cup level. But he retired. I'm
Yeah.
glad that he's okay. I'm sad that he retired in the way he did, but
Hmm.
my first thought selfishly was, does this free up cap space?
Yeah.
Which
Oh man.
unfortunately I don't think it does, but anyway, that's
Yeah, I don't think it
that.
does either. I kind of have shut the front door. I'm going to take a play on this. Daryl
Go.
Sutter is now the head coach of the Calgary Flames.
Yeah. What?
And I was like,
What?
this is actually pretty cool. I was a fan of Daryl Sutter. Obviously, he brought 2 cups, but I just think the guy's cool. Like, he just doesn't have, like, he's just so straight faced. I think he's a good coach. I love his son, Chris. Um, and Daryl Sutter has a farm in Calgary, so it's like not that far. So, like, he stayed at home, basically, right?
Remind everybody who he coached for previously, just in case they don't
Uh,
know.
Daryl Sutter was the head coach of the Los Angeles Kings, and he was the one who brought 2 cups to Los Angeles. Well, in addition to the team, obviously,
Right.
but he led them, and that was awesome. And I think the guy is just, I don't even know the word to describe him other than like Squidward, obviously, because he just sits there. He's like, "Meh." But he's a good coach. I know there's some drama with him, and some of the players didn't get along with him and whatnot, but I think that just ultimately happens when, everyone is in a competitive state. Not everyone agrees to each other, especially when there's a lot of testosterone going in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, but I'm really excited. They obviously lost their first game last night. Obviously, we were recording this earlier, but they lost their first game. I think that he coached. I didn't even get to watch it really, actually, unfortunately. But yeah,
Yeah.
super cool, but
How do you
really
think he's
odd at the
gonna
same time.
do? Yeah, like how do you think he's gonna do with the Flames? And he hasn't coached since leaving the Kings, right?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. I think he's going to do well. I think
I'm
they
sorry,
have
he
a
hasn't
lot of
coached in the NHL.
right. Yeah, yeah. I think he's going to do well. I think he has kind of the same dynamic that he had when he started with the Kings, where you have a young group of guys with some veterans on there, and I think that he really could. I think he could do some damage. Not damage isn't a bad thing, but damage isn't a good thing. I think he might have some issues with Matthew Kachuk, maybe a little bit. He's not too big on big personalities.
Mm,
Um, I think Drew Doughty was a pretty big personality for him that he wasn't really able to. I don't know if he really necessarily liked it, but he did because obviously Drew, is Drew. But yeah, I'm excited to see what happens. I actually might start watching all their games now, so I don't know.
for sure. For sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's it's crazy that he's come back and hopefully he can do some good. I don't know much about Calgary's previous coach or the firing situation, so I can't really comment on that, but
I do think it's funny that they fired the
yeah.
Calgary Flames coach. Didn't think. Just kidding.
That was good.
Oh,
That was good.
thanks.
Everyone's been thinking that, so you
I'm
nailed
I'm
it.
sure. I'm sure.
You
Yeah,
nailed it.
I'm sure. Welcome to my brain, everybody.
Welcome to the house, Kevin Kurz. He is a staff writer for The Athletic, covering the San Jose Sharks. Kevin has worked in hockey his entire career with a start in public relations for the AHL's Philadelphia Phantoms, then joining the Philadelphia Flyers as a digital media manager. We talk about that as well. He moved to the Bay Area in 2011 to cover the Sharks for NBC Sports California, where he spent 6 seasons as the Sharks insider. And Kevin also frequently appears on the NHL Network as a contributor. Please enjoy our conversation with Kevin.
Let's just jump into it. Tell everyone who you are and what you do.
Yeah, my name's Kevin Kurz. I've been covering the Sharks for this is my 10th season. And prior to that, I worked in the Flyers organization in public relations for 7 years. So I kind of took an interesting path here. I was in PR, working directly for a team before I transitioned over to media. A lot of times you'll see the opposite happen. So it was, again, a little bit of a different path. I never worked for a newspaper like a lot of beat writers have. But I was at NBC Sports for 6 years, and now I've been at The Athletic for 4.
That's awesome. So how did you get to where you currently are and how you got to working for the Flyers?
Well, yeah, I interned there during college, and then somebody left, and I started out as actually the PR guy for their minor league team, which was a super fun job when you're 22 years old, riding the bus with a bunch of minor league hockey players going from town to town. So formed a lot of close relationships and got some good stories out of that time. So for 2.5
Pause.
years,
Give us a quick good story. Give us a good bus story or a funny AHL story.
I don't know if I can tell anything specific, but it was just fun because
like
first
the bus
of all,
breaking down or like needing to take a limo or
that
like
did happen one time. There was one time the bus was pulling into a hotel in Norfolk, Virginia, and the bus driver was trying to hop a curb to get into the lobby and didn't see the overpass. And boom, the bus just hit the top of this overpass and just made the loudest noise. And so then the guys had to get to the game, and there was no Uber then, so they had to call cabs to get to the game. And then on the way back from Norfolk to Philly, the bus started making this whooshing noise, so we had to stop, and we were pulled over on the side of the road for a couple hours. And another bus had to come. We had to get off one bus to get on the other, and it's a 6-hour trip. The worst trip I ever took in the minors was we had a sleeper bus we went from, again, Norfolk, Virginia to Quebec City, which was a 17-hour bus ride.
Oh my God.
And I'm like low man on the totem pole, so I have like no room. All the guys have sleeper bunks in the back. I'm like in my little chair trying to sleep, and I'm 6'3". I don't really fit that well in a bus to begin with. And I will always remember we stopped over at some little diner in Lake Placid, New York at like 6 a.m. to have breakfast midway through the trip, and then had breakfast, got back on the bus, and went on ahead to Quebec City, which was at least we were going to Quebec City, a cool town, after a 17-hour trip.
That's insane. That's such a long time on a bus.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
like imagine like how I was gonna say, like, how do the players do it then? Like have to get up and like skate their asses off,
Yeah, and the players too, but it's the coaches. Like the Sharks minor league coach Roy Sommer has the most AHL wins and games coached in the history of the league. So he's been taking these buses, and it's a little different out here now that they're out west. They fly everywhere because they fly a lot of places. But back east, it's all buses. It's driving all throughout New England, up and down the East Coast. That's a lot of long trips. So. Forget the players. I feel bad for the coaches who've been doing it for 10 years.
That's true.
Players, you hope for the players are not doing it for more than 1 or 2, and probably builds character a little bit.
Not to mention the players are probably like a bunch of monkeys, and the coaches are like, "Come on, guys, like settle down."
Yeah. I mean, when I did it, at the same time though, when you're a minor league hockey player, it's you're supposed to go out with the boys and have a little bit of fun, and so in that regard, it was for me. I did that for 2.5 years, and it was just a great experience. So, worked from that. Then I went. Then I worked for the Flyers directly in PR before, like I said, kind of transitioning into media.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the relationship you have now with being a reporter, even though you're not, specifically affiliated with the Sharks, like you work as an independent, but you cover them. So like, tell us how that works for people who are really unfamiliar with your work as a journalist, of how do you build a relationship with the players? Like, how do you talk to them? Like, what are those conversations like? What is that like? Give us an inside look into the locker room or the lobby or over breakfast or wherever you are. Like, tell us like how that works and how you connect with them, besides like the scrum sort of like just like throwing a mic in with everybody else. Like, it's more than that, right?
Yeah, it does take some time, especially, coming out to San Jose, it was a little bit easier for me because it's not as big of a hockey market. So, a lot of times where the relationships are formed and where guys start to understand that you're, really working your butt off is when you go on the road, right? And that's usually the best time where you can have one-on-one with guys and and things seem a little bit looser. A lot of times these guys are happy to be in Chicago. They're happy to be in Boston. So they're in a little bit better mood. They're going out as a team together, either the night before the game or jumping on the plane afterwards. It's traveling with a hockey team is a unique experience. So, for the beat writers, I think it's obviously showing up every day and going in the room. But it's also when you're on the road and you have a little bit more one-on-one time with guys. And, most beat writers, after they've been doing this a while, they hate the scrums. And that's why Zoom sucks so bad, because, you get on these Zoom calls post game and it's just, you can't really ask, you're not going to get an interesting answer unless it's a unique player that is always honest, which those guys are a little bit fewer and far between now. But after a while, you start to form relationships with guys, but you're not friends with them either. And I think in order to serve your audience and serve your employer, you have to be honest about what's going on the ice. And you could have a conversation with one guy for 5 or 10 minutes about life in general, about what restaurant he went to dinner to last night, what sports his kids are playing. But if he has a crappy game that night, you gotta write about it. And so I think a lot of guys do understand that that's part of the job. And as long as you're walking in the room the next day and you're not trying to dodge anybody, and then you would hope there's a respect factor that, listen, this person I can have a conversation with him. I can be civil with him, but he's doing his job. I'm trying to do my job. And, hopefully everybody understands that dynamic. It's not always that smooth, but most of the time now, I think most guys get it.
Do you have a favorite story that you've been able to write on someone, or is there something that you look forward to writing about?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have a single favorite story. I mean, I can think of stories I've done the last year. I actually just did a story that went up this morning about Brent Burns.
Yes, this is on my list of we have to talk about Brent Burns being in Vikings. So go for it.
Did you watch the show? I didn't watch the show. I wasn't all that familiar with it, but
I haven't watched it. But I was like, now I'm gonna go watch that show because a hockey player is in it.
Yeah. He was, and he looked like he looked like a Viking for sure. So he was, I did that story where I had to Zoom with him for about 45 minutes. And I think we probably did that in late January. And then I talked to an executive producer and I talked to another actor on the show. And I talked to the woman that sewed this long braid in the back of his head. And he went out to the pub. So, Brent Burns is good topic for some of my favorite stories have been with him. And another one I did years ago was he lives on this ranch in the summertime and he harvests his own meat. So he has this thing called an axis deer, which he'll hunt in the summertime on his own property, and then he'll harvest the animal, and then he'll have the meat throughout the course of the hockey season. So he'll bring in these hunks of meat that he raised and killed and harvested himself, give them to the team chef and say, here, this is what I want for lunch. And the team chef will cook it up for him.
Have you been to the ranch?
No, I would love to do that. I'm going to have to I think he liked the story I did today about Vikings, so maybe I could convince him to let me come there this summer.
Right. Yeah. That's another layer. But tell us about what he said about his experience with the Vikings for people who haven't read your article.
Yeah, he loved it. He had been trying to get on the show, and unbeknownst to him at the time, one of the executive producers of the show lived in Toronto and went to a Toronto Sharks game and saw him on the ice and thought, boy, this guy would be good for Vikings. So it was almost it was almost kind of meant to be that it worked out. So, obviously it was a great experience for him. He loved it. And so, when a guy is that enthusiastic about some experience he had, hopefully I can get that to transfer in the story.
That's like a true Hollywood story of like they like they found him at a diner, like they saw Brent Burns on the ice, and then 2 days later he's on set and he's never been on set. Like I love
Yeah,
people
it
love
wasn't two
stories
days
like
later.
that.
It was a little bit of time, but he got lucky because they were able to do it in early August, right before like he sort of ramps up his training for camp.
Very cool.
Jeez. He's probably so amped up after this. He's like, I'm gonna win the Norris this year now.
Well, he did.
So
So,
what?
that was 2.5 years ago. So that was, I think, 2018. He was a Norris finalist that year. I'd have to check. He
Yeah.
won in 2017. I think he was a finalist again in 2018. So he was at
I think he
was
was.
at the prime of his career when he did that. Yeah.
Yeah, crazy. So what is a day in your life like pre-COVID and I guess during COVID too? I guess two different worlds. So
Yeah, I mean, a typical game. I would go to about 75% of the road games throughout the course of a season. So that gets to be a lot during the year. I still love it. Some guys get worn out by it. I love it. I mean, that's probably partially because I'm single and don't have any kids, so I don't have to. I'm not too concerned if I have to go away for a week. And frankly, I look forward to it a lot of the time. So obviously that's come to a halt. All the travel has come to a halt. For us, just because there's really no value in going to a game when you can't walk in the dressing room afterwards. You can't have those discussions that I talked about where you foster those relationships on the road because you're not seeing anyone. So, typical day in the morning, go to the morning skate. I would always try to look for a unique angle at the morning skate. Where I work at the Athletic, it's a little bit easier to come up with or dive into more interesting topics because I don't have to write a lot of the BS line combination injury stuff in the morning that no one was reading anyway. I can try to flesh out some other sort of story that I could, either write that night or later in the week or even a month later. Mm-hmm. So, you go to the morning skate. That's always a good time to get guys one-on-one because there's usually fewer people there in the morning. Then I usually have some time off in the afternoon to take care of whatever you have to take care of personally, and then go back to the rink usually about 5:30, 6 o'clock. And then, depending on if I'm writing after the game, you're there till, 12:30 some nights. And then the next day, if the team's practicing at 11, you're back there at, at the rink at 10:45. So, the way I explain to people is during the season, I'm usually working 6 days a week. And during the off season, I'm usually working 2 or 3 days a week. And by the end of the year, it all sort of balances out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for real. Do you have a favorite arena or city to visit when you go on road games?
I love Chicago. I love Vancouver, Montreal. Philly's my hometown, so I always like going back there. New York, Nashville, obviously. Everybody likes Nashville. It's the unique part of covering hockey is maybe opposed to the other sports is that you're routinely going to another country, right? Mm. The Pacific Division has 3 Canadian teams. So you're doing an Edmonton, Calgary swing twice a year. You're going to Vancouver. You go through Montreal, Toronto at least once a year. So I think that makes it a little bit more unique that you have to cross the border so often. And I know there's a lot of similarities between Canada and the U.S., but there's still enough differences that it feels, especially hockey in Canada, it feels a little bit special when you're there, especially in a place like Montreal, right?
Right. Oh, yeah. Tell us, you mentioned Philly, so give us a little bit of a comparison, if you will, of the overall vibe of the organization and the city and the fans compared to where you are now with the Sharks. Like, what's the hockey culture like in Philly, and then what's that hockey culture like in San Jose?
Yeah, it's different for sure. Philly's a little bit more of a blue collar, gritty town. No pun intended.
I love gritty. Do you like gritty? What's your thoughts on gritty?
Yeah, he's okay. I know the guy that helped design him actually, and yeah, it's.
Can we? Well, wait a second.
Okay.
Can you not tell me how amazing it was to see Gritty snowboarding?
That was pretty slick, yeah.
Snowboarding? I've never seen a mascot in my entire life just ripping it down a mountain in that costume. Like, come on, it's like good. It's just good entertainment. I think.
Young kid in that costume too. I know a young. I met him because they were out here for the All-Star game. I still have friends from when I worked there, and I'm not surprised that he can do that. I mean, he was like a former hockey player, definitely like an athlete inside of that costume. That much I know.
That's just so cool. Anyway, sorry, I digress. I
Yeah,
love
no, it's
I
okay.
low key love Gritty. I think he's really great for the league and the sport and bringing in, another generation, and like the way they do their social media. I think is really wonderful, and it really fits what I think Philly is. I've only been there for like 12 hours, so
Well,
you'll have to
coincidentally
elaborate.
enough, the Sharks were in Philly for for the Flyers home opener. I guess that would have been the start of 2019-2020 season. So our first game, or the Flyers' first home game, was against the Sharks. So I was there, and Brady came down from the rafters. Like, that was his first game, and the fans weren't really into it at all
Right.
then.
They were
So
like,
I think they were still sort of, on the fence as to whether they thought it was a good idea. I know some of the traditional fans were just dead set against it because, in Philly, it's a little bit more of a just hockey only town. They don't really want to any of the other sort of BS that goes along with mascots and whatnot. But I think it's worked out now. I think it's worked out. So it is, but Philly is different than San Jose. It's a little bit more of a hardcore hockey town. The media atmosphere is different. And that's, that was maybe a little bit of a struggle for me, and still at times is. I grew up reading the Philadelphia Inquirer, and then I worked around all these other journalists covering the team, and that's how I was sort of molded to be as a journalist. And maybe it's a little bit less common out here in California, especially when it comes to hockey, just because there aren't as many media people around. And but that's, I don't apologize for that. It's just that's just how it ended up.
Definitely. Well, I want to dive into the team a little bit more. What was your take on losing Joe Thornton but gaining back Patrick Marleau?
Well, yeah, I was, Joe, it was time for him to leave. I think, it was, I can remember back to the pre-trade deadline last season. I was the only writer on the road at the time, and I talked to him at Madison Square Garden, and it was maybe a week before the deadline. And I said, would you be open to going to a contender? And frankly, I thought he was going to say, no, I want to stay. I'm a Shark. I want to stay a Shark forever. But he told me, yeah, I was tempted. I'm tempted to go to a contender. I want a Stanley Cup. And I'm like, oh, okay. So, that story made some headlines. And then just based on that, I thought he was going to get traded. And I know there were a lot of talks to move him. I know there were teams that maybe were mildly interested, not interested enough for a deal to happen. And again, coincidentally, we were in Philadelphia on trade deadline day, and he didn't get traded. I was told by someone maybe 2 hours later after the deadline that he was pretty disappointed about it. And talked to him the next morning, and again, he went through. He's like, I want a Stanley Cup. I've been chasing this thing for 21 years. I wanted a shot. He basically said, I wish I had gotten traded. So seeing that, I cover this guy for a long time, and seeing that on his face, and just because he's usually pretty reserved when it comes to being in front of a camera and going on the record with stuff. So I kind of had a feeling that he would sign somewhere else. I didn't know Toronto, but I figured he would sign with a contending team, just because it was so obvious that he wants a chance to win a Stanley Cup. And the Sharks aren't very good this year, and I'm sure he saw that. He saw the writing on the wall. And then when it comes to Marleau, it's a nice story. I think it's good to have him back because this team is in a transition a little bit. He's a total pro. He leads the way for these younger guys. All they have to do is take a look at him to realize what it takes to stay in the league for 2 decades. And on top of that, in what could be a pretty down season, as long as he stays in the lineup, he'll break the all-time games played record. So that'll be a nice moment.
wow.
That's insane.
Who currently has that record?
Gordie Howe. Yeah.
Gordie Howe.
Oh.
He'll break the all-time games played record. I think I want to say it's April 17th, but so many games have been moved around. I'd have to double check that.
Yeah. So what do you think the team needs to have a better rest of the season, if you will?
Yeah. Well, they're in a tough position just because they don't have any, they don't really have any superstars up front. They don't have any Connor McDavids or Nathan McKinnons or Panarins or, you look at their lineup, especially their top six. And, they don't have a guy that I would put in the top 25 best forwards in the NHL, right? So because of that, they've got to rely on their depth scoring. And that's been a little bit of an issue too, because, because they've been so good for so long, they don't have a whole bevy or a whole stock of blue chip prospects ready to come up and lead the way. So they're in rough shape right now. Bottom line, their goaltending hasn't been very good for the last, this is the third straight season of that. So it's tough times, I would say, right now. Now, that said, they played their best game of the season last night against Colorado. They won 6-2. So they showed that they can kind of hang with the big boys, which I think was encouraging. But, that was one game. I don't expect them to be a playoff team. I think they have too many issues to overcome in order for them to stay in the race. But, we'll see where it goes. It's an odd place for them to be in, just because this team has been so good for so long. And this is really the first year where they're just not really expected, I think, by anyone to make the playoffs.
Go ahead, Breezy.
Oh, my bad. I was muted. I think it's pretty it's disappointing when a team kind of goes through that little rough patch. I know I've had my fair share of rough patches with some teams I follow, but is there anybody maybe on the current roster or maybe down with the Barracuda that you're like, dang, this guy, he's one to watch out for, or this guy's going to be an all-star one day, whether he's on the Sharks or another team?
Yeah, I would say, Mario Ferraro is a defenseman right now who's worked his way up the lineup, and he kind of came out of nowhere. Well, I don't want to say he came out of nowhere. He's a second-round pick, but I don't think he was expected to make the team out of camp last year, and he made the team out of camp as a rookie, never played in the AHL. Had his rookie moments, his ups and downs throughout last season, but when he came to camp this year, he was ready to go. Bob Bugner just praised him from day one, and he's just increased his role throughout the season here. Again, playing with Brent Burns, playing the top four, penalty killing. He's even seen some power play a little bit. And he's a guy that I think he has such good energy and he has such good practice habits that it's a little bit too early to give him a letter. But, this guy has future alternate captain and maybe even future captain written all over him, in my opinion. So, he's been a bright spot. And then, the Barracuda, they don't have much, frankly. Again, just because the team hasn't had many top round picks or early first round picks throughout the last few years, because they've been so consistently good. So, that's part of, I think, the pessimism of the fan base right now is, well, we don't really have a great farm system either right now. So what's happening here? The current team isn't very good, and there aren't many prospects that are, blue chip type prospects on the horizon. So, we'll see. A lot of time those guys, they can kind of come out of nowhere, where there's a third, fourth, fifth round pick that can work his way up. We'll see if a guy can do that. I think we need to let the AHL season play out a little bit longer to see if there's anybody like that in this organization.
Definitely. And it's funny that you mentioned Mario, because I feel like his name has consistently come up like across every single platform that I've seen. And I think he's doing a pretty good job on social media too. And
he has his own YouTube page.
Yeah. And from your point of view, like, what does social media do for players? Like, how big of an impact does that have? And also part two to the question is, why do players maybe not take advantage of their social media?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure they have to be careful. I feel like hockey players are a little bit more reserved when it comes to the other athletes and the other sports, just because I think the culture of the sport is so team oriented that I don't think anybody wants to stand out amongst the crowd, right? And some guys do, right? Brent Burns is a guy that he likes doing those commercials, obviously, in the Vikings thing, like we talked about. And, there's some other guys, maybe Evander Kane is a little bit unique in that sense too. But I think maybe that's changing with some of the younger players coming up, guys like Austin Matthews, who's maybe a little bit more into it. But I think at the end of the day, most guys just try to try to blend in with their teammates. And that's not to say a guy like Mario Ferraro is, I'm sure everybody on the team, no one cares that he has a YouTube page and he's showing off all of his, his gadgets and his tech stuff that he's into. But I do think, just like I said, I think these guys are a little bit more just worried about how they're perceived within the team than how they might be on the outside. Not everybody, but I would say the majority.
Oh, that's a perspective I hadn't thought about, that they're more focused on the team and the coach's perception of who they are as opposed to the rest of the world, if you will, or like thinking about how they could put themselves out on a social media platform to set themselves up for the future and create this brand and image and marketing. That's an interesting insight. Would you say that there's any other fun facts or interesting things you've learned about any players in the league, like in any of the stories maybe that you've written in the past, but like how you were talking about, like Burns has, his exotic farm and all the animals and like fun, appropriate things to share, but like unique things that maybe not everybody knows that.
Logan Couture is really into the head injury stuff and trying to raise money for concussions. And I know that's really important to him. I know he has an event every year back home in Toronto to raise money for that. So, he's a guy who's had a couple head injuries in his career. I'd have to think of some other guys here. Paul Martin was like that too. Paul Martin had his charity. He was a really, really good guy. I think everybody respected him.
What about Jumbo Joe?
Joe, yeah, I know. I remember someone told me he was part owner of this bar downtown, or this restaurant bar in Los Gatos, California, which is near San Jose. And I asked about it one day. He's like, "Nope, you can't say, that's a secret." So he wouldn't let me. Joe is just one of those guys that I think, everyone talks about how. And it's come out now a little bit in Toronto, how he makes up these nicknames for these guys that they don't know where he gets them from, but he just sort of pulls them out of his butt. Whatever, so William Nylander was like Slick Willie or something like that, I saw today. And I know in the Sharks room, he had a bunch of nicknames for guys that, no one could figure out how he came up with these nicknames, but that's just who he is. He was one of those guys that really brought a team, was kind of a glue guy, and as well as being one of the best players in the league for such a long time.
Oh, that's fun. I love it. Did he give you a nickname?
No. I get called Kurzy for whatever reason. I think that might be from when I was on TV. That's what the host would call me, but no nicknames for me.
Well, yeah, you got to have a hockey like that's what
I guess
hockey players
yeah.
call it. Like you're Kurzy. Like, yeah, of course.
So,
like,
yeah.
Unless you have like.
They probably have a couple names for me that I don't know about.
No, give yourself a little more credit.
Yeah.
Like when you go into a locker room looking like when you're like looking for a story, but you don't always know what that story is until you uncover it. Do you find that there are certain stories you prefer to write, like something about like a charity or a passion project of a player, or like the Burns story, or is there something else I'm missing that you really enjoy, like digging into?
I enjoy the day-to-day hockey coverage, honestly, more than anything, and I like veering towards the off-ice stuff. Every once in a while, but I do try to stick to mostly the hockey stuff. Like for example, last season, Marc-Edouard Vlasic played in his 1,000th game, and whenever a guy hits a milestone like that, you try to do something a little bit, try to blow it out a little bit. And I did a story about how he came up out of nowhere and he had this great rookie year and no one knew who he was before he got to camp really. And then he ended up being one of the most important players on a very good team that year. And I went back and talked to old teammates, old coaches of his, and I was happy with the way the story came out. So I do like focusing on the hockey stuff more than anything. And now that said, I'm glad I don't have to, like I mentioned before, I'm glad, with my website, I'm glad I don't have to go to a morning skate and write about, a fourth line winger who's coming off of a thumb injury or whatever. Like our site doesn't do that because most people don't care about that. We don't care about clicks and page views. So it does give me a little bit more time to sort of dig in and find the more unique hockey angles that I think people are interested in.
Yeah, because we've talked about this on the podcast and with different guests in the hockey world of how we think there, or at least I think Breezy agrees with me, but we think there's a little bit more of a need to get to know some of the players off ice, but like not to the extreme of like being on Keeping Up with the Kardashians, get to know them, like have a little bit more of the social media presence of just like, Austin Matthews showing his fashion, air quotes. And, I won't go on a tangent on about Austin Matthews fashion, but there's, with the way of the next generation of fans coming in, I think there's a level of some expectation with social media and having accessibility to so many people that I worry that that's going to affect fans in the future. Not that every player has to be on social media or anything, but do you think there will be some sort of shift or blending of the team first mentality along with the keeping up with the times and the new fan base coming in?
I don't know. I guess social media is so important these days that I think I see that more from the team side where, when I was in Philly, I was running the digital media stuff, and I was writing everything, and then we got into video, then Twitter came along, and it was like a 2-person operation. Now you see these teams and they have 6, 7, 8-person digital media departments, because that's become, when I started out on PR, it was PR was up here and digital media was up here, and now it's basically the opposite. Like the digital media and running the social media accounts and the website is so much more important than a PR staff is, frankly, to me, just because they put the stuff out that the majority of fans see, and when they screw up, that's then it makes headlines, right? So you got to be careful with that too, but. I think teams are real heavily invested in that now, and that should help. I would think it bring the younger fans along, but the ticket prices are an issue too. I cringe every time I see teams raise ticket prices, and around here the Sharks in a normal year almost all of their games are 7:30 at night, even on Saturdays and Sundays. I'm like, why aren't you guys playing more 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock games where you can bring in
families and kids?
Yeah. So, and their response is, well, the minor league team is here too, but I mean, that's not the same. I think you got to bring, if you want to build fans, you bring them to the big event when it's sold out. So,
yeah. I never thought about that before, about moving games up to get more fans in the seats.
Yeah. I know that they don't like doing that, and you're going to laugh, but the reason in Philadelphia was because the beer sales were less. It's true. I mean, it's true. Yeah. There's nobody crowding around the bar for, there are, but there's fewer people crowding around the bar in the arena at 12 noon than there would be at 6:30. So.
Well, after COVID, I don't think anyone's going to have a problem with beer sales.
No, that's for sure. Yeah. Hopefully they get people back in here by next season. Full arena. Yeah.
Crazy. So I think that's pretty much starting to wrap it up. I think I have one more question before we get to our final 3. But what would you say is your favorite part about your job?
I do like the travel aspect of it, and that's what I miss the most right now. I like, and it's not even the fact that you get to go. I have friends in all these different cities now because I've been doing this for a while. Whether it's college friends or high school friends or people that I get to keep in touch with because I get to travel city to city and go to all these great restaurants and expense them, which is nice. But it's just that it's more so the fact that in this sport there's just so many good people, whether it's players you had a relationship with before or fellow media people, writers, broadcasters. It really is a good sport in terms of the people that work in it. So I do miss seeing a lot of these people, whether it's my friend in Minnesota who covers the Wild, or the Flyers radio guy who I've known for years. And just the fact that I guess that's just like society too now, right? Everybody misses seeing seeing everybody else in person. Um,
And it's not the same on Zoom.
no, it's not. But even in a normal year, that's my favorite part, is just getting to see people that you don't get to see very often, and have lunch with a work colleague that you respect, or have a beer with them after him or her after the game, right?
Yeah.
Want to take it away, Ray?
Sure. We'll do the final three. We ask all of our guests, no matter who they are, these three questions. Who is your favorite hockey hunk?
Oh, jeez. What?
Everybody's gone on the record with something.
Well, let's see. That's a big guy. You know who I really liked when he was here? I'm going to say Brendan Dillon.
Ooh,
Yeah.
Good
solid
one.
choice.
Yeah.
And who is your? Go
When you
ahead.
say hunk, do you mean he's like,
Good looking or very good on the ice? Whatever your definition of a
some of my
hunk is.
female friends were kind of liked him. I think he was a little bit of a fan favorite that way, but he was just a genuinely good guy off the ice. He was someone that I'd walk in the dressing room and talk to about life in general, and he was, I one of my favorite parts of the job is watching guys that maybe are borderline AHL, NHL guys and just progress throughout the course of their careers. And he came to San Jose from Dallas, and everybody thought he was okay, right? But not necessarily a guy that was going to really stake a claim for a job. But he got better and better every year, and now he's playing in the top four for a Stanley Cup contending team in Washington. So, yeah.
Yeah. Who is your favorite hockey lady?
Who's been a really good friend of mine for a long time? Tracy Myers in Chicago. She covers the Blackhawks for NHL.com. Her and I overlapped at NBC. She was covering the Blackhawks for Comcast Sportsnet when I was covering the Sharks. So, whenever there were drafts or events, a lot of us Comcast Sportsnet writers would get together, before they laid everybody off. And she's become a good friend of mine, and she's someone who's great at her job. Yeah.
And
The first one that comes to mind, yeah.
And do you have a Sidney Crosby story?
Yes. So I have two. Actually, I have a couple. I have a really good one, actually. When the draft was in Los Angeles. I feel like that was in might have been. Was it in Los Angeles? Sidney Crosby hadn't been around that long with the Penguins, but yeah, it was in Los Angeles. So I think that was in 2010. The Flyers staff and the Penguins staff were staying at the same hotel, and most players don't go to the draft, but Crosby was there for whatever reason with the Penguins people. And for the Flyers, Bobby Clarke was there. He was still the GM. I think he was still the GM at the time. If he wasn't the GM, he was still in the front office. And I'll never forget seeing Sidney Crosby and Bobby Clarke sitting down. I'm not sure they knew each other before this, but they started chatting at the bar. And next thing you know, they were sitting down together, chatting for like an hour. And everybody else, I was with some other coworkers, like, boy, I would love to hear the conversation right now that Sid and Bobby Clarke have been having for the last, 30, 45 minutes.
Yeah, we've had all good stories, just so you know, of Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, when I worked for the Flyers, I couldn't stand the guy. I thought he was a miner, a diver, and like a lot of people did when he was first coming up. And but now in media, like you walk into the room and he knows that everybody wants to talk to him, and to me, he's always been so respectful of the media and appreciates that, sometimes a visiting writer's there that never gets to talk to him or see him, but he'll sit there and answer your question, from what I can tell, 9 times out of 10. So, you have to respect guys that do that.
Absolutely. Well, big fan of anyone who takes the time. Just like you, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us, and tell our listeners where they can follow you.
I'm Twitter at Kurz NHL, and then The Athletic, which I think I think most hockey fans know where we are at this point.
I think so. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Sure, you got it. Thanks for having me.
We're gonna follow up this episode. We've never done a follow-up episode, I guess.
Like a postscript, if you will.
Our post-show recap. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not even really a recap. Maybe, kind of. Well, all I've got to say is Kevin said a few things in this episode, and we thought that maybe we should comment on them, and just for fun, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think we should. I think the stuff about Joe Thornton giving really weird nicknames to players that had like zero context that nobody understood except Joe Thornton, I thought was very Joe Thornton. But what kind of nickname would you give me, like, if you were Joe Thornton? What do you think he would nickname me?
Man, that's hard. I feel like, I mean, you're already the hockey lady, so...
But it's got to be like super off the wall that makes no sense.
Super off the wall that makes no sense. Well, this one kind of makes sense. You go by Rae Rae. Mm-hmm. Would you be the ray of sunshine?
Sunshine.
Sunshine. You just be sunshine.
Sunshine. Have you seen Remember the Titans?
No.
Oh, there's a great scene in there where they nicknamed the guy from California Sunshine. Sunshine.
Well, there you go. Maybe you'd be sunshine.
I think you would be spice.
Spice.
Or like oregano or something. You know, like something super random because you like to cook, right? But like...
Yeah.
Or like paprika. Is that...
Paprika.
Paprika. Yeah. I like oregano. Oregano. Hey, oregano. Oregano and sunshine now coming to you from the House of Hockey podcast.
Oregano and sunshine. All right. I'll go for it. Why not?
That should be the name of like a Twitch channel or something.
Sunshine and oregano. That's actually kind of cool. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of like it, actually. So, Brent Burns, how did he word it? He farms his own meat?
Yeah.
Is that what he said?
Yeah.
So would you eat meat from Brent Burns' farm? Or that he has
butchered
and
raised and meat he's raised. Yeah, that's kind of right. Of course I would eat anything that Brent Burns gave me from his farm.
Yeah, I would too.
Yeah, I would know that those animals were probably getting fed the best animal feed out there because Brent Burns can afford it. And they're probably really well taken care of. And if he knows how to cook, which that I don't know and I haven't heard any proof of, but as long as he knows how to cook meat, you know what? I've changed my mind. I would eat Brent Burns's farm-raised animal meat if Breezy barbecued it.
I like that. I would do that.
Breezy is a really good barbecuer of all the things. Would you eat Brent Burns's cooking and of farm animals?
I would. You know, I'm not one for... I know this is probably bad to say since I love eating, meat, but I don't think I could ever physically harm an animal. So I don't know if I could be the one to do it, but if he were to do that, I would definitely cook it. I do believe that he smokes a lot of his stuff. I think he did a series or something. I don't know. Maybe it was just like a little segment he might have done for the Sharks or for the NHL Network or something. I think I remember seeing him do something like that. I don't think I would eat it if he seasoned it with only oregano.
No.
Because that sounds terrible.
No, I don't think you put oregano on meat. Maybe
a
little on chicken if you're doing like an Italian style chicken, but...
Yeah. But I'm going to go ahead and say yes to that. Sunshine.
Thanks for coming over to our House of Hockey podcast and hanging out with us. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. And in the meantime, you can follow us on social media. Just look for House of Hockey podcast. We'll be back next week.